He survived 3 tours overseas as a Marine sniper, only to be handcuffed in a grocery store for matching a description. What happened next left an entire courtroom speechless. Darius Kendricks just wanted to grab some almond milk and eggs. It was a Monday, around 4:15 p.m., at a Kroger off Franklin Road in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. He had earbuds in, nothing playing, just noise canceling, while scrolling through a short list on his phone. His back still ached from sleeping on the VA hospital mattress the night before. He hadn't even been back in the States a full week. He turned down aisle 6. That's when he noticed the shadows moving in from both ends. 6 officers. No warning. "Hands where I can see 'em!" one yelled, gun drawn. Darius looked up, half confused, half in disbelief. A voice in his head said, "Don't make a sudden move, just like they trained you." So he did exactly that. Slowly placed his phone on the shelf, then raised both hands. "Sir, I think you have the wrong—" "Turn around, now!" He turned. The cuffs were on in under 10 seconds. Cold, tight, too tight. Customers stood frozen. One woman clutched her purse. A teenage girl near the freezer held her phone up, recording. Another whispered, "What did he do?" The answer came from a rookie-looking cop still catching his breath. "Matches the description. Robbery in Smyrna last night." Darius heard it, but it didn't make sense. "I live here," he said, still facing the metal shelves. "I've been back from Afghanistan 5 days. Check my wallet. My military ID's inside," but no one checked. One officer patted his pockets, found his ID, gave it a glance, and tossed it into a plastic bag. The march outside felt longer than it was. He tried not to look anyone in the eye, but he saw their faces, some confused, some skeptical, a few angry, but staying quiet. As they pushed his head down into the cruiser, Darius caught a glimpse of himself in the side mirror. His jaw was clenched. The fatigue was gone. All he felt was humiliation. On the drive to the station, they didn't say much. One officer sitting beside him glanced at his name tag and muttered, "Kendricks." "Huh," but didn't say more. At the precinct, he was fingerprinted, searched, and photographed. His phone had been left in the cart. His wallet was in a bag. His arms, still stiff from his last sniper op, were now turning red around the wrists. "Can I call someone?" he asked a sergeant behind a glass window. "You'll get one call once we confirm everything," she replied without looking up. He was taken to a small cell. No bench, no clock. Just cinder blocks and a sour smell in the air. For the first time in years, Darius felt truly out of control. He sat on the floor, laid back, closed his eyes. Memories of Helmand Province came back. The nights he couldn't tell if the buzzing in the air was a drone or a hornet. The kids who watched from rooftops, not knowing if they were signaling someone. The sniper nest they spent 16 hours in, covered in sweat and grit, waiting for the one shot that would save a convoy. There was no honor here, no mission, just a man alone, because someone thought he looked like trouble. He didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Around 3 a.m., a guard came by and said something through the bars, but he didn't hear it. He kept thinking of his mother, Miss Florence. She didn't even know he was home yet. He was going to surprise her this weekend. She used to say, "Always stand tall, baby. The truth walks, lies run." He had stood tall, and still here he was. But that was just the beginning of the humiliation. By sunrise, the bruises on his wrists were dark purple. Darius stood when the light cut through the bars. His knees popped, his neck was stiff. The concrete had drained the warmth from his bones, but that wasn't what made him cold. A different officer came by with a paper plate, dry eggs, a slice of toast that looked like it had been stepped on. No utensils. "Water?" Darius asked. The man didn't answer, just slid the tray inside and walked off. He leaned against the wall, eyes on the floor, and tried to eat. One bite. That was enough. His stomach turned. He didn't know what time it was. There was no clock, no phone call, no window. The only sounds were distant doors slamming and the occasional cough from another cell down the corridor. At some point, maybe mid-morning, maybe earlier, they called him out. The same officer who'd ignored his military ID was waiting near the hallway. His voice was flatter now. almost bored. "Let's go, Kendricks." Darius followed, still cuffed. They took him into a small interview room. 2 chairs, 1 table bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner, blinking red. A different detective walked in this time. Older guy, salt and pepper stubble, looked like someone who used to be a beat cop back when kids played outside until the streetlights came on. He sat down across from Darius, flipped open a folder, and gave him a long look. "You a Marine?" "I am. Still active? Just finished my 3rd tour." The man nodded slowly. "Where?" "Helmand, Camp Dwyer. Before that, Sangan, and Kajaki." "That's real," the man muttered. "You got a lot of miles on you." He slid a photo across the table. The suspect was grainy, caught mid-stride outside a liquor store. He wore a hoodie, dark jeans, and had facial hair. "That's supposed to be me?" Darius asked. "Honestly," the detective said, "I don't think so. But the officer who cuffed you said you were close enough to hold. I told them who I was, showed ID." "Yeah, that part's on the report." Silence. Then, "I've already put in a recommendation to release you. It'll take a few more hours, but you'll be out by this afternoon." Darius stared at him. "That's it?" The detective looked uncomfortable. "Look, man, I don't know what to tell you. Wrong place, wrong time. I read your file. You saved lives out there. You got medals, recommendations, hell, a letter from a commandant. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't pull those people's phones down yesterday," the detective sighed. "You're right. It doesn't." When they brought him back to the cell, he leaned against the wall again, this time standing. If he sat, he felt like he was giving in. A young officer passed by, slowed his steps, looked at Darius like he recognized him, then kept walking. By now, someone had to know, and someone probably did. A few hours later, a sergeant came with a clipboard. "You're being released. No charges. Clean file." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Why was I even booked?" "No arrest on record," she said. "Just a detainment. You can get your property at the front." She handed him a plastic bag with his wallet, a receipt for his belt, his watch, and a slip for his phone, which they said was still at the store. "Someone going to apologize?" he asked. She didn't answer. He walked out with a ripped t-shirt and sore hands. The air hit different. Too sharp. Too bright. Outside, a young man stood waiting, early 20s, holding Darius's phone. Nervous. "You dropped this," the kid said. "I saw the video online. I figured they wouldn't let you keep it. I waited here for a while. Thought maybe you'd need it." Darius took the phone. No case. No scratches. "Thanks," he said, then added, "What's your name?" "Reggie," the kid said, trying not to fidget. "You film it?" "No, but I saw the one that girl posted. Said you were military. My uncle served too." Darius gave him a nod. This time, it meant something. He walked toward the sidewalk. Each step burned, not because of pain, but because the ground didn't feel like his. But someone had started asking questions on the outside. By the time Darius made it back to his apartment, the video had already cracked 50,000 views. It was filmed by a teenager named Tasha Mendelson. She'd been in the store grabbing frozen pizza when the cops rushed in. She didn't know who Darius was. She just knew something didn't sit right. So she pulled out her phone, hit record, and posted it to TikTok with a simple caption. "This man was arrested at Kroger for matching a description after showing his military ID." "What are we doing?" The comments flooded in. "He was calm the whole time." "They didn't even check his ID? That's a Marine. WTF. And then, somebody needs to fix this." It wasn't just outrage. It was recognition. People had seen too many versions of this before, but this time, it wasn't someone shouting or running. It was someone who looked like he'd been carrying the weight of too much already. Someone tired, and that changed everything. One of the people who saw the video was Staff Sergeant Elijah Brookstone, stationed at Camp Pendleton. He was scrolling during lunch when he stopped cold. He recognized Darius immediately. "He trained me, man," he told his bunkmate. "That's Staff Sergeant Kendricks. He saved us in Helmand. I watched him take a bullet and still finish the op." Elijah didn't stop at sharing the video. He wrote a long post detailing Darius's service, his mentorship, his leadership. He tagged everyone he could think of, fellow Marines, veterans groups, even a few journalists he'd followed since high school. "I don't know what y'all call this," he wrote, "but I call it disgraceful." The post caught fire. Within hours, it reached Colonel Dana Probst at Quantico. She knew Darius personally. He'd been selected for advanced marksmanship under her leadership. She remembered the way he stayed late to help other snipers adjust their scope, how he never lost his temper, even in brutal conditions. She forwarded the video and Elijah's post to one more person, General Raymond Stokes. Now, Stokes wasn't the kind of man who got involved in local arrests. He was head of operations for the Eastern Command, running logistics, authorizing base deployments, reviewing security requests. But he remembered Darius. He remembered him from a base in Ramadi, back when Darius was just a quiet lance corporal who volunteered for every single night shift. Stokes had approved his Silver Star back when they were still catching heat for how few black servicemen received recognition. Stokes didn't watch the video once. He watched it 3 times. Then he stood up, walked to the window of his office in Arlington, and told his assistant, "Get me the name of the judge, find out where he's being held, and cancel everything on Friday." Back in Murfreesboro, Darius didn't know any of this was happening yet. He was sitting on the edge of his bathtub, staring at the bruises around his wrists. They looked like rings, permanent almost. He pressed gently, winced. His phone buzzed again. Another message, another link to the video. He hadn't watched it yet. A voicemail popped up. It was his mother. "Boy, what happened? I seen your face on that TikTok mess. You better call me. Don't make me fly out there. Lord help me, I'll embarrass everybody if I have to." He almost laughed. Instead, he sat in silence, finally pressing play. It was surreal watching himself get dragged out of a grocery store, hearing how calm his voice sounded. He didn't feel calm at the time. He felt furious, but somehow it didn't show. He read the comments. One of them stopped him cold. "My brother served with him in 2017. This man doesn't deserve this. Fix it." He put the phone down. Things were moving. He didn't know how fast, or how far, but he could feel it. But it would take more than views to undo what had been done. Friday morning arrived with a thin layer of fog across the parking lot outside Rutherford County Courthouse, the kind that disappears by 9 a.m., but leaves the air heavy and strange for a while. Darius stepped out of the county van wearing khaki slacks, a navy blue shirt, and county-issued slip-ons. He hadn't asked for clothes. They just showed up at his door the day before with a note from a local veteran outreach coordinator. It read, "You are not alone. We're watching. See you Friday." The courtroom wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty either. A few folding chairs in the back held people clearly not related to the case. Retirees with legal pads, a couple of college students, 2 military guys in plain clothes who didn't speak but stared down anyone who did. A woman in a brown pantsuit stood near the back wall, typing nonstop on her phone. Maybe press, maybe not. Darius walked in, escorted, but unshackled this time. Even so, he felt chained. At the defendant's table, he sat beside a public defender who introduced herself in a whisper. "I'm Dana Russo. I got assigned late. Sorry for the delay. This whole thing's unusual." She laid out some paperwork, glanced at him, then leaned closer. "Look, I've handled dumb arrests before, but yours? I read the file. It's thin. A blurry photo and an officer who's already being reassigned. I won't let this ride." Darius kept his eyes on the judge's bench. "Appreciate it," he said. The courtroom doors creaked again. Florence Kendricks stepped in, straight-backed and furious. She wore a gray coat and her Sunday hat, the one Darius hadn't seen since his graduation from sniper school. Her eyes locked on him, but she didn't wave, just gave a short nod, the kind that said, "You all right, baby? I see you." Darius had to look away for a second. His throat tightened. Judge Leo Callan finally entered the room. 63, white-haired, sharp-tongued, known for speeding through dockets and snapping at lawyers who wasted time. He sat, adjusted his glasses, looked over the file, and sighed. "State of Tennessee versus Darius Kendricks," he said flatly. "Mr. Kendricks, I'm reading here that you were detained without a warrant based on a description that has since been proven inaccurate. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Darius replied. The judge rubbed his temples. And the ID presented at the time matched your identity and military status. Yes, sir. Then why are we here? Russo stood. Your Honor, we're filing a motion to dismiss all charges. There are no charges, the judge interrupted. Just a mess. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Someone near the back muttered, Good. Another whispered, Damn right. Judge Callan was about to bang the gavel and close it out when the courtroom door opened again, and everything stopped. A tall black man in full military dress uniform walked in, 4 stars on his shoulder, rows of ribbons across his chest. His presence cut through the room like steel. It was General Raymond Stokes. He didn't look left or right, just walked forward step by step, then stopped directly in front of the judge. Permission to address the court, Your Honor, he said, voice deep and measured. Callan blinked. You may. Stokes turned to Darius. Staff Sergeant Kendricks, he began. I've followed your service record since 2013. You are a marksman, a team leader, a survivalist, and above all, a man who represents the highest standard of this country's military. Darius stayed silent. His mother from the back let out a quiet, Stokes continued, facing the judge now. Let me be clear. What happened to this Marine was not a procedural error. It was a failure. A failure to respect the men and women who risk their lives for people they've never met. A failure to distinguish suspicion from service. And a failure that embarrassed not just this court, but my entire command. The judge looked stunned. Even the bailiff leaned forward. General Stokes took a deep breath, stepped closer to Darius, and spoke directly to him again. On behalf of every officer who ever gave you a command, I apologize. You did not deserve what happened to you, and I will personally see to it that your name is cleared at every level. Darius's hands didn't move, but his shoulders finally loosened. Then, the door at the back of the courtroom opened. The second door swung open softly, too softly for most to notice at first, but Darius saw her. A young woman with tightly coiled braids, wearing a press badge clipped to her cardigan, stepped in with a camera in hand. Not a phone. Not an iPad. A real camera. Behind her came a man with a boom mic slung over one shoulder. The judge sighed. Who let in media? They were cleared, Your Honor, the bailiff answered. Regional public access. They're doing a veterans' rights segment. Judge Callan looked like he wanted to object, but by then the camera was already rolling. General Stokes didn't flinch. He stood tall, then turned back toward the gallery and continued speaking. Not to the judge now, but to everyone else in the room. I've served in the military for 38 years, he said. I've seen men like Staff Sergeant Kendricks run through bullets to drag others to safety. I've signed death notices. I've stood at funerals. What I haven't done enough of is speak out when those same men return home and are treated like they're disposable. He looked straight at the camera now. If this can happen to him, it can happen to any of us. And if you think being in uniform is enough to protect you once you're back on American soil, then you haven't been paying attention. Every person in that courtroom, even the court clerk, was frozen in place. You could have heard a cough from 3 rooms over. Darius didn't move. His jaw tensed slightly. But inside, something stirred. It wasn't pride. Not quite. It was validation. Stokes turned one last time to the judge. I'm requesting a formal review of the department's handling of this case. The military will be filing a complaint. That paperwork is already en route. That's all I came to say. And just like that, he gave Darius a final look, then stepped back. Callan exhaled slowly. Well, Staff Sergeant Kendricks, it appears your name is not only cleared, but defended from the highest level. He tapped his gavel. Once. Sharp. This hearing is concluded. Mr. Kendricks, you're free to go. And on behalf of this court, he paused, looked at the press, then said what probably took effort to leave his mouth. I apologize. The courtroom stood still for a few seconds after that. Then chairs creaked. Whispers restarted. Florence Kendricks held her coat tighter but didn't speak as her son stood and turned toward her. The 2 military guys in the back exchanged a quick glance, then nodded toward Darius as he passed. Outside the courtroom, Reporters were already waiting. The girl with the braids tried to catch his attention. "Mr. Kendricks, could you speak to what this means for returning veterans?" "Not right now," Darius said. Calm, measured. "But," I said, "not now." Florence joined him on the courthouse steps. She didn't hug him, just stood beside him, close enough that he could feel her breathing. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "No," he answered, eyes still forward. "But I'm here." Down the street, parked by a hydrant, was a black SUV with tinted windows. The door opened, and General Stokes stepped out once again, this time without his hat. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked. Darius gave a small shrug. They started walking slowly down Maple Street, the noise of the courthouse falling behind. Stokes spoke first. "You handled yourself with more restraint than I ever could have. Didn't feel like I had much of a choice. Still, it mattered. People saw, people heard. What you said, that carries weight." Darius stopped walking. "I haven't said anything yet." Stokes raised an eyebrow. "You plan to?" Darius looked up at the streetlight. "I might." But Darius wasn't done yet. 3 days passed before Darius said a word publicly. He ignored every interview request, left every message on read. His phone lit up constantly, notifications piling into corners of the screen. Instagram tags, email pings, 3 voicemails from someone at NBC who sounded just a little too eager. But then came the email from a school counselor named Marcus Shin at Hillsborough High, 20 minutes outside of town. Subject: "We need you to talk to them." Message: "Staff Sergeant Kendricks, we have a JROTC group of about 30 students. Some of them saw the video. A few now question if military service is worth it. One kid said, 'Why wear a uniform if they'll still treat you like a suspect?' Would you speak to them? Nothing formal. Just 20 minutes of truth. M. Shin." Darius read it 3 times. He didn't respond right away, but something about that line, 20 minutes of truth, got to him. He showed up that Friday. Wore the same uniform he hadn't touched since returning. Sharpened the creases. Cleaned the boots until the toes reflected his ceiling fan. Florence saw him before he left. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," he replied. "But it feels right." The Hillsborough Auditorium wasn't fancy. Just plastic chairs, dusty curtains, and a row of flags propped up near the back wall. The kids sat scattered, some with crossed arms, others scrolling on phones. When Darius stepped up to the mic, the room didn't go quiet right away. Not until he began speaking. "I'm not here to convince anybody of anything," he said. "Not here to defend this country or explain away the last 2 weeks." He paused. "I just want to tell you what I've seen and what I've learned." He told them about the mountains of Helmand, about the sandstorms, about watching a friend get medevaced while he held pressure on the wound. He described nights when the only light came from muzzle flashes, and days when laughter was the only defense against losing your mind. But then he pivoted. He told them about Murfreesboro. He told them how fast it happened, how little his service mattered in that moment, how people watched and said nothing, how the cuffs weren't the worst part, the silence was, and how, in spite of it all, he still believed in standing for something. A hand went up near the front. A boy in a green ROTC jacket, probably 17. "What stopped you from snapping, going off?" Darius let the question hang. "I thought about it," he said honestly. "But here's the thing. I wasn't just wearing my name that day. I was wearing yours, too. Every young brother who wants to be seen. Every sister who ever got ignored in a boardroom. Every vet who came back and felt invisible." Another student raised a hand. This time a girl, hair tied back, face serious. "Would you still serve, knowing what happened?" He gave it a second. 2, then 3. "Yes," he said. "But I'd serve differently. I wouldn't stay quiet about things that felt wrong. I wouldn't swallow every insult just because I thought it made me tough. I'd speak up, like I'm doing now." Silence filled the space again. Then, slowly, applause. Not loud. Not performative, but real. When it was over, several students came up to shake his hand. One hugged him without asking. Another slipped him a note that read, "Thank you for saying what my dad never could." Outside, in the parking lot, Mr. Shin waited. "I don't know what you did in there," he said, "but that room felt different when you finished." Darius looked back toward the building. They just needed someone to be honest. And once he finished, no one looked away. By Monday morning, the story had landed on national news, but not in the way you'd expect. There were no flashy headlines screaming about injustice, no overproduced segments, just a quiet 3-minute clip on a veteran-focused program on PBS that showed General Stokes addressing the courtroom and Darius standing silent, eyes steady, hands still. Then the clip of Darius speaking at Hillsborough High went viral. That's what really flipped the switch. People didn't just watch it, they shared it, reposted it, debated it, spliced it into compilations. Veterans of all backgrounds weighed in, some angry, some moved, some ashamed. "He's calm. That's scarier than yelling," one commenter wrote. "God help us if we need men like this and treat them like trash," said another. And the flood came fast after that. The Murfreesboro Police Department was forced to release a statement. It was filled with generic phrasing. "We regret the incident. Under internal review. No ill intent. Nobody bought it." The arresting officers were identified within days. Officer Brent Tully, the one who first shouted, had been with the department under 2 years. His file was now public, and it showed prior complaints, including one that had been buried. Suddenly, Tully was on paid leave pending an investigation. Darius didn't comment. He didn't post. He didn't need to. Others did it for him. Elijah Brookstone wrote a column in Task and Purpose that began with the line, "If you were trained by Darius Kendricks, you knew 3 things. He shot straighter, cared deeper, and expected more from you than anyone else." It went viral. Again, the city council called a special session. Local activists started gathering outside the precinct, not in protest, but in vigil, a quiet one. No signs, just candles and photos of soldiers, many of whom had never received a proper welcome home. And the clerk from the grocery store, remember Reggie? He got interviewed by a podcast, told the story of how he waited outside the station just to return Darius's phone. His voice cracked when he said, "It was the least I could do. He looked like my uncle." Even Tasha Mendelson, the teen who filmed the video, ended up on a Zoom panel with other youth leaders talking about digital witnessing. Her video had reached over 2 million views. Meanwhile, Darius stayed grounded. He went back to visiting his mother on weekends, fixed the cracked tile in her kitchen, walked her to church like he used to, before deployment. Some people stared at him in town. A few asked for photos. One woman left a pie on his doorstep with a note that just said Semper Fi, but he didn't let the praise get to him. "I didn't do anything heroic," he told Florence one afternoon as they folded laundry. "You stood still when the storm hit," she replied. "That's harder than most people know." He didn't argue. What got to him wasn't the media attention. It was the letters, real letters, handwritten, from veterans, from kids, from parents, from a woman in Oregon who said her father had been arrested the same way in 1986, from a boy in Arkansas who now wanted to join the Marines because, if people like you serve, maybe I should too. He read every single one. One evening, sitting at his kitchen table, surrounded by envelopes and coffee stains, Darius picked up his phone. He finally opened the camera, and he recorded a short video. "People keep asking what I want. Truth is, I didn't ask for any of this. But now that it's here, I hope we don't waste it. I hope next time someone's accused of something, we slow down before we snap judgment. I hope the uniform starts to mean something again. Not just in theory, but in how we treat people." He paused. "And if you're watching this thinking, what do I do next? Maybe start by looking at the person next to you. Make sure they're seen." The video hit over 3 million views in 48 hours, but he had one last thing to do. The high school talk should have been enough, but it stuck with him. The kid in the green ROTC jacket asking why he didn't snap. That face, that voice, it kept replaying in his head. So when Mrs. Webb from the Rutherford County Juvenile Center reached out through a mutual contact, asking if he'd be willing to visit, he didn't even pause before saying yes. "Don't need a camera," he told her. "Wasn't planning on bringing one," she replied. It was a Wednesday when he showed up. No uniform, just jeans, boots, and a charcoal hoodie. Mrs. Webb met him at the security desk, clipboard under one arm, keycard dangling from her neck. "They're not all bad kids," she said as they walked down the hall. "Most just never had anyone who really saw them." Darius understood that more than he could say. The room they walked into was painted off-white, with a line of plastic chairs and a few bored-looking teens already slumped against the walls. No one stood. A few sized him up like they were waiting to be preached at. One kid had his arms folded so tight across his chest you'd think he was bracing for impact. Darius stood in front of them. No mic, no podium. Just him. "I'm not here to tell you how to live your life," he began. "I'm not your father, not your pastor. I've done things I don't expect you to understand. But I know what it feels like to be written off. I know what it feels like to have people look at you and see a threat before they see a person." A few heads lifted. "I got arrested in a grocery store," he continued. "Didn't run, didn't yell. Still ended up in cuffs." He let the silence hang. "I've been shot at in 3 countries. Lost friends, saved some. Still didn't stop me from getting treated like a suspect in my own neighborhood." The kid with his arms folded finally spoke up. His voice was low, but firm. "So what? You just forgive it?" "No," Darius said plainly, "but I also don't drag it like a chain. I carry it like a warning label." That got a few smirks, a raised brow. He stepped closer. "You ever do something you can't explain? Not because you're evil, but because you didn't know better? Or no one taught you better? Or you just didn't care that day?" Several nodded. "I get that. I've been that. But here's the part nobody tells you. Guilt can eat you. Regret can trap you worse than these walls ever will. But accountability? That's where freedom starts." A pause. Then he asked, "What would you do different if you knew somebody was watching? Not the judge, not a camera, but your little brother, your niece. Someone you haven't even met yet who might walk the same path you're on now." No one answered right away, but they were listening. Mrs. Webb looked stunned. She wasn't used to silence in that room. After the talk, one boy came up as the others filed out. His sneakers were too big for him, laces loose. "You really shot somebody?" he asked, eyes locked in challenge. "I did," Darius replied, calm, "because they were about to kill a family. I didn't want to, but I had to." The boy held that for a second, then nodded, almost to himself. "I want to be better. Just don't know where to start." Darius handed him a folded paper. "It's a list of recruiters who won't talk to you like you're beneath them. Not telling you to sign up, just giving you options." The boy took it without a word and walked off. Mrs. Webb stood beside Darius as he packed up. "You shook something loose today," she said. "I didn't shake anything," he answered. "They were already moving. I just showed up." And in that room, something started to heal. The cameras eventually stopped calling. The press moved on, chasing newer stories, louder controversies. But that didn't bother Darius. He hadn't done any of this for headlines. A few weeks after the juvenile center visit, he sat alone on a park bench at Stonebridge Park in Murfreesboro, just watching the traffic pass along the edge of the grass. It was almost noon. Light wind, a few joggers, kids on bikes, the kind of normal that felt rare now. He wasn't wearing anything that screamed military. No ribbons, no boots, just an old hoodie and a ball cap that had faded in the sun. Florence had packed him a sandwich earlier. She always did that when he didn't ask. As he sat there, a middle-aged man came walking by with a boy trailing behind him, maybe 10, maybe younger. The kid was wearing a camo backpack, dragging it through the dirt. He looked at Darius, then looked again. The father gave Darius a polite nod. The boy stopped. "Hey," he said. "Were you the guy on the phone video?" Darius didn't move for a second. Then he smiled a little. "Yeah, that was me." The kid's face lit up like he'd seen a superhero. "My teacher showed us." You were real calm. I liked that. Darius nodded once. Appreciate it. The boy kept walking, turning back every few steps to look at him. The father didn't say much, just gave Darius a look that said more than words could carry. A thank you, a respect, maybe even a bit of shame, but honest. When they disappeared down the path, Darius pulled out a small notebook. Not a phone, not a tablet, just a beat-up notepad he'd carried since his second tour. He flipped to a page near the middle and wrote something. It's not about what happens to you. It's what you do with it after. Later that week, he visited the old community center where he used to run youth drills before his last deployment. It was mostly empty now, but the director said they'd been trying to get more people involved. Said they needed someone who could relate, someone the kids would actually listen to. Darius offered to volunteer. No pay, just time. The director looked stunned. You sure? I got a few hours a week to spare, he replied. Might as well use them for something that matters. He started small. 2 boys, then 4, then a dozen. He didn't talk much about war. He talked about discipline, awareness, reading a room, learning how to breathe through pressure, the stuff nobody teaches in classrooms. The room filled week by week. People still whispered when he walked into grocery stores, still pointed sometimes, but not like before. It wasn't scandal anymore, it was reverence. And even though it made him uncomfortable, he never ran from it. Because he knew what it meant for others to see him. Not as a threat, not as a mistake, but as something they could be. A benchmark. A reminder that calm doesn't mean passive. That restraint is a kind of strength too. Back at home, Florence kept a printout of the courtroom photo on the fridge, the one where General Stokes stood beside Darius. She didn't show it off to guests. It wasn't about that. It was just there, like a quiet badge. One night, as they cleared the dinner table, she looked at him and asked, You feel like yourself again? He thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, he said. I feel better. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. We don't all wear uniforms, but we all serve someone. A neighbor, a student, a family member, the person behind you in line. The story of Darius Kendricks isn't about war or handcuffs. It's about what happens when we finally start treating each other like we matter. If this story moved you, share it. Don't let it stay silent. Someone needs to hear it.